A third is that the universe has a reason for its existence. I've already acknowledged from point one that I think that that's going to be true, whether it is contingent or necessary. And then on number 4, we get to this: if the universe has a reason for its existence, then that reason is God. How did we get here? Now, the truth of the matter is that in philosophical circles, in apologetic circles, when you're talking about perhaps this version of the argument from contingency, the argument doesn't exist merely on its own. There are a number of justifications. This argument itself is contingent upon these explanations for why they can claim that the universe, if it has a reason for its existence, that reason is God. But that's not contained in the argument, and it's not here for us to address, and I'm not convinced that that's actually the case. And that means that the conclusion they end up reaching, that God exists, is as questionable as this premise that the explanation, the reason for a contingent universe is a God. But this conclusion just assumes already a sustaining version of contingency. So if we were to concede that all of the points so far are correct, that everything that is contingent has a reason for its existence, the universe is contingent, therefore the universe has a reason for its existence. If the universe has a reason for its existence, this reason must be God. This final conclusion that God exists does not follow from the argument unless the argument is about a sustaining version of contingents. And this isn't argued as in any case. Premise 4, where it says if the universe has a reason for its existence and that reason is God, is one that hasn't been demonstrated. It's merely asserted. But also, we're not clear as to whether this is asserting that the best explanation for the existence of the universe is this thing that they're going to call God. How did they determine that this is a sustaining thing versus a causal thing? For example, there could have been a God who created a universe and ceased to exist, perhaps spewing forth its essence to create the universe and then cease to exist, in which case we would still have a universe that is contingent and a universe where it is contingent upon a God, but that God no longer exists. So there has to be more here, even to get to the final conclusion that they want, which is that God exists. Because the real conclusion from this, even if you were to accept the first 4, which we don't, is that a God is the explanation for the origin of the universe. That the universe is contingent upon a God. It's not necessarily contingent upon a God in a sustaining sense.
Okay, lots of points here, Josh. What do you think?
I think we could perhaps first start off with the discussion on sustaining and causal, because I think we've touched upon that already. So that would perhaps be the shortest kind of thing to start off with. And I think the shortest thing which we can start off, and I think that his idea of the contingency argument relying on the sustaining form of contingency, I don't think is necessarily very obvious to me, or at least not in the way that it's kind of the contingency argument is reliant on some definition of contingency. That's like, obviously that is the case. Whereas that contingency is a form of sustaining contingency. Not necessarily. I think that a causal contingency is not necessarily contradictory to the contingency argument. And as a result, I don't necessarily think that his argument about it having to be a sustaining form of contingency is a very good one.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So I think Matt's kind of saying, like, what if the cosmos has just always existed? Doesn't that mean, like, we have to go to sustaining contingency? And it's like, well, maybe if you think the cosmos has always existed, but, like, at least I'm convinced, at least, like, I don't even have to have, like, this, like, knockdown Big Bang cosmology to this, but, like, just with, like, the nature of, like, limits and, like, how many brute facts we have to pose, like, it seems like there's a lot better candidates for necessary explanations than the cosmos. So I think that's probably my worry here. And then, I mean, he's right. Like, you can't go from like, oh, there must be a cause of the universe or cause of the cosmos to God for free. So I agree with that. And, you know, like, obviously there's other arguments that would be used to try to get from this necessary foundation to God. So, but I mean, yeah, I'd have to just study the contingency argument more to see if people are saying that like causal contingency doesn't work with an infinite cosmos. But I mean, I just don't really see any good reason to think the cosmos is necessary in the first place, because it seems like you're gonna have to pose a lot more at the foundation than you would if you'd say just like God exists or like it's perfection or something like that. So yeah,
I definitely agree with that. So I completely agree with you when you say, well, we can't go from a contingent cosmos to God for free, and that's something I see a lot of people do or commit. It's something which I don't feel very comfortable with. I don't necessarily think that the people like Craig, which he suggests later, do, because they actually do that. Well, they do actually solve these problems in other places, not necessarily in every single article. It's kind of like when we make YouTube videos or when we're trying to respond to someone in the comment section and they're like, oh, why haven't you responded to my comment? I get that quite a lot on my YouTube channel. There's this guy who's like pestering me so much. He's like, oh, you're just as silent as your God. You do not exist, or like you're really not answering, something along those lines, right? And I'm like I've responded to absolutely everything you're questioning on somewhere else in the channel. You go look at that instead, right? So I think that it's very important that we do indeed try to solve the gap problem, but at the same time realize that not every single paper on contingency argument is going to address the gap problem, mainly because those philosophers have addressed the gap problem somewhere else, somewhere in another paper they've written.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm basically on the same page as you. So yeah, I think we can both agree that like, well, it seems like the cosmos isn't necessary, so we don't have to really worry about like the sustaining form of contingency arguments. But I mean, like even if it was like always existed, I still think because like there's these limits in the cosmos, which seems to suggest that there must be some further explanation, even if it's just always existed. So I still think it's possible for there to be causal contingency arguments, even if the universe was past infinite, which I mean, I obviously don't think it is. So.